There comes a moment when the veil of arrogance falls, and the truth pierces through the armor someone has spent years forging. It's not a sudden flash of light, not a grand cinematic revelation. It's quieter, more haunting. It comes in the stillness of a night when the phone doesn't ring, when the room feels emptier than usual, and the air is thick with a silence that almost has weight. That's when it hits. The realization that the love they once dismissed, underestimated, and twisted into something unrecognizable was the only love that ever truly mattered. It's not easy for such a person to face themselves. For years, they've survived by deflecting blame, rewriting history, and constructing a narrative in which they were the victim, the misunderstood genius, the one who was always right. To accept that they destroyed something genuine requires them to confront the fact that the flaw wasn't in the love. It was in them. And that's a truth sharp enough to cut through even the most fortified self-image. They start to see it in fragments at first. A memory of a kindness they brushed off. A sacrifice made for them that they never acknowledged. The way someone's eyes lit up when they walked into the room. Not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of pure affection. They didn't know then how rare that is because they believed the world was overflowing with people ready to worship them. But the world isn't like that. Most people guard themselves. They don't give their soul unless they see a reason. And they had found someone who gave it freely, only to burn it to the ground. Regret is a strange thing. It doesn't come when it's convenient. It comes when it's already too late to fix what's been broken. They replay moments that once seemed insignificant, the careless words they spoke, the silent treatments they gave, the times they withheld affection just to see the other person bend. It seemed like power then. But now, looking back, it feels like vandalism against something sacred. They weren't proving strength. They were proving cowardice, because it's far easier to destroy than to nurture. Far easier to tear someone down than to build the kind of connection that lasts. And here's the thing about real love. It changes you. Whether you want it to or not, it carves itself into your identity. You can pretend it didn't matter. You can distract yourself with attention, new relationships, or shallow praise. But somewhere deep inside, you remember the way it felt to be truly seen and still accepted. You remember the comfort of knowing there was someone in the world who would stand by you even when you were at your worst. You remember the safety of it. And once you've tasted that, every imitation feels hollow. This realization doesn't happen while they're still surrounded by noise and ego-feeding distractions. It happens when the crowd things out. When the friends they thought were loyal move on. When the admiration they lived for fades. That's when the absence becomes undeniable. And absence has a way of speaking louder than presence ever did. It says, you had it, and you lost it. And it's not coming back. They might try to reach out, to test the waters, to see if there's a chance of revival. But real love, once betrayed too many times, learns to protect itself. It grows armor of its own. And so the person they once dismissed as too emotional or too sensitive no longer offers open arms. Instead, they offer distance, boundaries. And the narcissist realizes with a clarity that borders on panic that the door they assumed would always be unlocked has been sealed shut. The tragedy here is not just the loss of the other person. It's the loss of who they could have been if they'd embraced that love instead of destroying it. Because love like that doesn't just nurture the one receiving it, it transforms the one giving it a chance. It demands growth, honesty, and courage. It demands you put down your weapons and your walls long enough to meet another human being's soul to soul. They could have had that. They could have built a life on that. But But instead, they chose control over connection, image over intimacy, pride over peace. And now, standing in the ruins of what they created, they have to face the hardest truth of all, that the love they lost was not replaceable. It wasn't something they could find again by swiping through profiles, chasing attention, or charming someone new. Because love like that comes once, maybe twice if you're unimaginably lucky. And they didn't just lose it, they destroyed it. That's when the silence gets heavier. That's when the nights feel longer. That's when the self-justifications stop working. And they're left with the echo of the one truth they can't twist or bury anymore. No one will ever love them like that again. It doesn't begin with a loud crash or a sudden lightning strike of awareness. Instead, it arrives quietly, creeping in at the edges of the mind when the distractions that once kept the truth at bay have faded. It's in the moments when the phone doesn't buzz, when laughter is absent from the air, when the nights stretch out endlessly without the comfort of knowing someone is there for you. The realization doesn't knock. It slips in through the silence, catching them off guard. At first, they try to ignore it, thinking it's just a passing thought, just a wave of nostalgia, but it lingers, pressing down with a weight that can't be shaken. It is in these still, empty moments that they finally begin to see what they've done. They remember times when they felt powerful, untouchable, because they believed they were the one controlling the narrative. They believed that the other person needed them more than they needed the other person. They mistook loyalty for weakness, kindness for naivety, and unconditional love for something they could test without consequence. And yet here they are, years or months later, realizing that the one they thought would always be there is gone, and not in the temporary way that leaves the door open for reconciliation. Gone in the way that feels permanent, as if a chapter has been written, sealed, and closed forever. In the quiet of that realization, they start to notice small things they once overlooked. The way that person would ask about their day, not out of politeness, but with genuine curiosity. The way they always remembered the little details, what coffee they liked, the shows they enjoyed, the way they liked the curtains, drawn just slightly open to let the morning light in. These were things they took for granted, barely acknowledging them at the time. Now, in the absence of those details, the world feels colder, harsher, stripped of the softness that love once brought into it. They think back to arguments in moments of cruelty, times when they pushed boundaries to see just how far the other person would bend. They remember withholding affection to prove a point, using silence as a weapon, and tossing out sharp words without caring how deeply they cut. Back then, it felt like control. Now, in the stillness, it feels like self-sabotage. They begin to see that those actions weren't moments of power. They were acts of destruction against the only safe place they'd ever truly known. The quiet makes them hear things they've avoided hearing for years, the sound of their own justifications echoing hollowly. They were too sensitive. They once told themselves, "Thee overreacted." But now those phrases feel like lies whispered to protect an ego too fragile to face the truth. The silence strips away those defenses, leaving only the raw reality. They hurt someone who only ever wanted the best for them. The strange thing is, the awareness doesn't come with immediate tears or dramatic outbursts. It's more unsettling than that. It's a slow, sinking feeling, like realizing too late that you've been walking on a bridge that's been crumbling beneath your feet for years. They had ignored the cracks when they were small, thinking the structure would hold forever. But now, looking back, they see every moment that the foundation weakened, every time they kicked it at it just to see if it could take the weight. It couldn't. And now there is nothing left to stand on. In that stillness, they can no longer escape into noise. Music, conversations, new relationships. None of it drowns out the sound of what they lost, because it's not just the loss of a person, it's the loss of a feeling. That rare, steady, grounding certainty that someone truly saw them, flaws and all, and still chose to stay. Once you've felt that, the absence is louder than any argument, sharper than any insult. And when the silence sets in, it forces you to face the truth that no one else has ever looked at you that way, and maybe no one ever will. This moment of quiet devastation is so much more powerful than any confrontation could be. There's no one to argue with, no one to shift the blame toward. There's just them and their own reflection. And that reflection is no longer the version of themselves they used to believe in. It's smaller somehow, stripped of the confidence that once came from having someone who believed in them unconditionally. The silence has a way of showing them that the strength they thought was their own was actually borrowed from the love they destroyed. The realization is not loud, but it's relentless. It doesn't leave. It settles into the corners of their mind, coloring every memory and reshaping every story they once told themselves. And deep down, they know that this quiet, heavy truth will stay with them far longer than any fleeting distraction could. Because now they understand it wasn't just any love they lost. It was the only real one. And the silence that follows is proof that they will never find it again. Real love is not something that appears in every chapter of your life, waiting patiently for you to notice it when you're ready. It is rare, fleeting in its opportunity, and often disguised in moments that feel ordinary until they are gone. The kind of love that truly sees you, your faults, your contradictions, your weaknesses, and still chooses to stay is the kind of love that most people will never experience even once. To have had it and to have lost it is not just a matter of heartbreak. It is the kind of loss that reshapes your understanding of what is possible in human connection. When they look back now, they realize that what they once had was something different from anything else they've encountered before or since. It wasn't built on conditions, performance, or image. It wasn't the product of manipulation or mutual convenience. It was built on a foundation of genuine care, a willingness to weather storms together, and an unspoken promise that even in the darkest moments, they wouldn't be abandoned. At the time, they didn't recognize the rarity of that. They assumed that if they lost it, someone else would come along offering the same thing, or perhaps even more. But the truth they have now discovered is that most people guard themselves too closely to give that kind of love away freely. The world is full of relationships that mimic love but lack its depth. There are countless connections built on attraction, on shared interests, on the desire for companionship, or on the illusion of intimacy. But real love, the kind that offers both freedom and belonging, both acceptance and the challenge to grow, is a scarcity. It cannot be purchased with charm, secured with flattery, or maintained by fear. It grows only in the soil of mutual respect, trust, and vulnerability. When you destroy it, you are not just losing a person. You are losing an entire world that could have been built together. They begin to see how, in their arrogance, they treated something precious as though it were disposable. They thought the well would never run dry, that the other person's forgiveness would be infinite. Each time they pushed boundaries or inflicted wounds, they assumed there would always be another chance. After all, hadn't there always been? But they never stopped to consider that love, no matter how deep, cannot survive in a climate of neglect and cruelty forever. Even the purest devotion has limits when it is continually starved of nourishment. Now, standing outside of it. They see clearly what they once refused to admit. This love was not the kind that could be replaced by simply finding someone new. The qualities that made it real, the patience, the resilience, the ability to see past the masks and into the truth of who they were not common traits. They were the result of the other person's character, forged by their own experiences, values, and depth of heart. Losing them meant losing access to a kind of understanding that cannot be replicated, because no two hearts are exactly alike. And it is only now, in the absence, that they understand the poverty of imitation. They can find people who will say the right words, who will offer affection, who will laugh at their jokes and smile in their presence. But it all feels thinner, like a painted backdrop in place of a real landscape. The warmth isn't as deep, the connection not as steady, the trust not as instinctive. They find themselves scanning every new face for traces of what they lost, but it's never there. Not fully, not authentically. That void becomes its own presence, always reminding them of the difference between something that is real and something that only pretends to be. They also begin to grasp the brutal irony of their situation. When they had the real thing, they underestimated it because it felt secure. They thought security meant abundance, that there would always be more if they lost this one. But the truth is that security is the result of something rare being cherished and protected, not the sign that it is easily replaced. In destroying it, they didn't just remove one person from their life, they removed the only living example they had of what love could truly be. This awareness doesn't come without pain. It's not the sharp, immediate pain of a breakup, but the slow, enduring ache of living with the knowledge that you will likely never hold something that rare again. It's the sting of recognizing that when the universe handed them a gift most people will never receive, they chose to crush it in their hands. And now, no matter how far they search, no matter how many people they meet, they will always be comparing, always measuring, always longing for something they themselves destroyed. The tragedy deepens when they realize that it wasn't just the love they lost, but the version of themselves that could have grown within it. Real love doesn't just exist for comfort. It shapes, strengthens, and elevates you. It challenges you to rise to meet it, to become someone worthy of it. By rejecting or abusing it, they didn't just lose the relationship. They lost the chance to become the better self that love was calling them toward. That opportunity doesn't return in the same form. Other loves may come, but they will be different, carrying their own flaws and limits. So they live with the understanding now that they had in their hands something extraordinary, something most people only dream about, and they treated it like it would last no matter what they did. That is the wound that never fully heals. The knowledge that the only love that was truly real, the only one that could have transformed their life, is gone forever. And it was their own actions that ensured it would never return. Destroying something is always easier than building it. Tearing down requires no patience, no discipline, no sustained care. You can dismantle what took years to create in a matter of minutes with a single thoughtless action, a cutting remark, or a calculated withdrawal of affection. That's the path they chose. Control over connection, power over partnership, and pride over peace. They didn't have to put in the work of understanding, compromising, or humbling themselves. Instead, they reached for the tools of destruction because they were easier to wield and required less of them in the moment. What they didn't see then was that every act of harm was chipping away at something that could never be rebuilt in the same way. Love, real love, is not a fragile thing by nature. It can endure hardship, conflict, and change if it is nurtured. but it is vulnerable to neglect. It suffers when it is repeatedly tested, mocked, or used as leverage. They had a person willing to weather storms with them, someone who brought warmth and safety into their life, but instead of protecting that, they treated it as something to exploit. Each time they withheld affection to prove a point, each time they twisted words to make themselves the victim, each time they refused to listen or meet halfway, they weakened the structure of the relationship. And because destruction feels powerful in the moment, they mistook that feeling for strength. There is a rush in seeing someone bend to your will, in watching them try harder, give more, love deeper despite the wounds. For a narcissistic mind, that rush is intoxicating. It feels like proof of superiority. But the truth they are only coming to understand now is that this wasn't proof of strength at all. It was proof of fear. It takes no courage to dominate someone. It takes no vision to tear down what has been lovingly built. The real courage would have been in vulnerability, in choosing to put down the weapons and step into the discomfort of mutual respect. That courage they never found. In those days, they saw the relationship as something endlessly renewable. They thought they could strip it bare, take everything offered, and it would still replenish itself. They assumed that no matter how much damage they caused, the other person would continue to show up, continue to forgive, continue to love. And for a long time, that was true, because the one they loved believed in them, believed in the potential of the relationship, believed that the effort and pain might be worth it in the end. But even the most steadfast heart will not endure endless harm without breaking. When the breaking point came, they didn't see it at first. They mistook the quiet withdrawal for temporary space. They believed the distance was just another round in the same game they had been playing for years. They didn't realize that this time it wasn't about teaching them a lesson or waiting for them to come around. It was about survival. The other person had decided that to keep loving them would be to lose themselves completely. And so they left not in rage, but in quiet self-preservation.